Welcome to episode 315 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm all right. Rob, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Don't think I have anything to go over this week. Do you?
Nothing specific, but I've been kind of beating my head against conference talks for the last week or so, trying to get ready under the presumption that I will be able to go to TechTown in Norway, which still has not opened travel to U.S. citizens, and the presumption that CppCon will be happening here in town.
Yeah, hopefully everything is able to, all the conferences are able to happen. All the travel can happen. I know it'd be nice to start getting back to normal again.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can get there. Okay, well, at the top of every episode, I like to read a piece of feedback. We got this tweet from Schulzme saying that CppCast had just one to go, and a screenshot of our Twitter account where we were at 9,999 followers, and we have since gone up. I think we were at like 1,000 or 10,030 or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So thank you for everyone who's following us on Twitter. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for listening.
Didn't we comment at some point that we used to comment about how the CppCast Twitter account had more followers than either of us, or it was one way or the other?
I think that's definitely still the case with me, although you I believe, are over 10,000 followers, right?
I'm pushing 17 at the moment, yeah.
Nice.
It's just kind of weird. Every now and then, well, because at a certain threshold, the app stopped notifying me that I was getting new followers, which is fine. I don't need that all the time. And then it's just been the last couple of months. Some days I'll get 3 notifications in one day, which is then being sent to my smartwatch. You got a new follower. And I'm like, why did it decide to tell me about that person following me?
Yeah.
What logic is happening in Twitter's mind here that I needed to know about that new follower? I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube. Joining us today is Linus Groh. Linus started his programming journey in 2012, fiddling around with languages like Python and JavaScript, eventually combining them in his work as a full-stack web developer. Later, he decided to learn C++ and dive into operating systems development by contributing to the SerenityOS project, where he's now a maintainer and active member of the community. You'll mostly find him working on the system's own JavaScript engine, libjs. Linus, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
What kind of projects did you work on, or do you work on as a full stack developer?
So I basically started learning programming by looking at Python first. So I did small games. Turned out that didn't really interest me. So then I moved on to web development, basic interactivity with JavaScript, just expanding past HTML only. So got into jQuery and all that stuff. And did basically personal websites for friends. And then later got my first job and did a lot of interactive dashboards and data visualization, stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. So trying lots of different things, basically. And right now, for my day job, we're developing a freelance management platform. So working with Django and React on that. My full-time job.
A freelance management project? Is this something that I need as a freelancer because I've got a bunch of different clients?
It works both ways. So either as a freelancer, you can manage your contracts through that, or as a client, find people for your projects.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I also find this interesting because I feel like so many of us in the industry got interested in computers because we liked playing video games, and we thought someday I'm going to be a game developer. You start right out by saying, yeah, I made some games. It wasn't really very interesting, so I moved on to other things.
Well, yeah, that's basically the reality of it. I don't regret that. it was fun when I tried it out, but I don't really see myself doing doing game development, so I kind of moved on from that pretty soon.
Well, I just dashboards and that kind of thing I just find are fun. I like to look at something and see all the things happening. So, but
yeah, definitely.
anyhow.
Yeah. Okay, Linus. Well, we have a couple news articles to talk about, and then we'll start talking to you about Serenity. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, so this first one is pretty big update from Compiler Explorer. They are now going to support multiple file compilation and linking, so you can put more than just a single source into Compiler Explorer. This is pretty great, Jason.
This is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much people are going to push the limit to this, and how large of a project can Compiler Explorer really support.
Hey, give me a frame buffer and we'll see how far we can push this.
Yeah, I saw those news, and it's really interesting, especially for us in the Serenity project, because we don't use the standard library, right? So we got our own. And usually when someone has like a little code piece that they want to show to someone, they have to import pieces of our own standard library and just paste that into a single file to make it work. Because they can't just include vector.h or whatever. And so having that ability to just add more than one file will probably make it a lot easier to do those for our project specifically, right? Because you could just grab whole files, whatever you need, and put it all in there.
I haven't actually played with how it works to add files in. Did you play with it yet?
I was just looking at it a moment ago. There's looks like you can upload files, I believe. Yeah, browse on your computer.
I didn't actually try it yet, so I only had a look at the example they provided. But yeah. I imagine that should be possible.
It seems like, it's interesting the way you are talking about using this from a Serenity perspective. In a sense, you could take this and like fork it. I mean, there's no history tracking really to speak of, but you could like hand the project like your URL to someone and have them rearrange files and whatever until you get the example how you want it or whatever. Yeah. It does seem like it still needs a little bit of refinement though, because I've noticed every time I load this URL, I get a compiling window in a couple of the frames instead of having loaded it from the cache like you would normally expect with Compiler Explorer.
Right. Okay. Next thing we have is the August 2021 C++ mailing. A couple new papers here. Do you have a chance to look at some of these, Jason?
I did. Yes. I was just looking at them like an hour ago.
Any ones you want to highlight?
Well, I found it interesting that if you start digging into them, a considerable number of them mention ranges in some way. They're little fixes that were found because of ranges or things that people want to do to make ranges easier to use. And I just find it interesting that ranges and the corresponding concepts from them have kind of worked their way through the corners of the standard here.
Yeah, definitely. Linus, do you have any thoughts on any of these?
So I had a look at this, and I mean, the bits that affect the standard library don't really affect us in the project because, again, don't use it. But on the other hand, we always use like the very latest C++ compilers. So we're already on C++20. So it's good to like keep an eye out for what's next because we're not behind 5 years. As soon as the compilers ship new features, we're basically going to use them. So it's good to keep like an eye on those current developments and to see what's going on right now.
Right. Okay, and then last thing we have is a new C++ book, Introduction to Programming with C++ for Engineers. Yeah, it's always nice to have new books coming out. And I wasn't familiar with this from meeting C++ before.
Yeah, so Meeting C++ started their collection of C++ books
Yeah.
about a month ago, I think. I got an email from Jens about it and have so far failed to actually add my own book to the list. I should probably do that at some point.
I have to admit, I have not read a single C++ book yet.
Oh, wow.
But I really enjoyed reading books early on in my programming career because it's a really good way to just soak up that knowledge, opposed to like clicking from one blog post to another. Because like in the book, you got a little bit more order going on, and then you start at the basics and can go more in depth. So it's really good to have good books out there. And I should really read a C++ book one day.
Well, there is no lack of C++ books coming out right now. And one of the things that stood out to me about this one is, there's been a lot of self-published books, myself included. There's also been there's a couple of publishers that have just been like pumping out C++ books. This one is IEEE Press, and this might be the only C++ book that I've actually seen from IEEE Press. So I find that interesting, that particular data point interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
I also couldn't help but notice that the cover picture on the meetingcpp.com actually has, now I'm probably going to get the name partially wrong, but I believe his name should be pronounced Bogusław, something similar to that, because of the way. And so it's a Polish name probably because of the way and the L with the line through it. But the cover shot in the meetingcpp.com has his name spelled wrong. It doesn't have the line through the L. But if you go to amazon.com, the picture of the cover there is correct. So at some point it got fixed by the publisher. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so Linus, I think we already mentioned a little bit about how you work on the SerenityOS project. You want to tell us about how you first got involved?
Right, so I guess as most people discover the project is through Andreas's YouTube channel. So for those not familiar, he does hacking videos, like working on the system, pretty much uncut. Like you're going to see his process, you're going to see his mistakes. I think that's really appealing to many people because it's a difference to all that highly focused, highly cut, highly trimmed down content that also exists. So I don't remember how exactly I got there, but probably through Reddit or some YouTube recommendation. So I started watching those videos, and then eventually in early January 2020, I thought I would make a little fix because usually he mentions things like, okay, I found a little bug here, but let's not get distracted right now. And that's like a perfect opportunity for the watcher of those videos to like go and fix a little bug. And we still get that today. Like people come in and said, hey, Andreas mentioned this in a video and I fixed that bug. So that's also how I started. So it was a little tweak in the terminal emulator library, just renaming some stuff. And then eventually he started working on the JavaScript engine in May, I think. So that was basically when I really jumped in and wanted to heavily work on that because it seemed really exciting, like to work on a from scratch JavaScript engine where he just wrote the first couple of lines. Literally everything would still need to be implemented, and that kind of sparked a lot of interest in me. So that's where I really started to contribute regularly.
So you said, you're talking about fixing a bug in the terminal emulator. Did you know any C++ at all before this point?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. So I didn't really know any C++ at that point. I had some very minor experience with Arduinos, which have like Arduino IDE, and you write some, I think it's actual C++ in
it
there.
Is C++, but they limit, you have no library at all available.
So it's like very basic. And I had a really hard time getting used to that. Like coming from dynamic languages like JavaScript and Python, getting into making pointer magic work is really tough in the beginning. So I didn't really get really far with that. So I wouldn't count it as actual experience. So I kind of went into it with a little bit of Java experience. So there I got a little bit of like strongly typed languages, but not really any C++ yet. So I kind of started learning by doing, just smaller and smaller, doing smaller and smaller bits, and kind of working my knowledge based on that.
So just out of curiosity, do you actually remember what that first bug was that you fixed in the terminal emulator?
It wasn't really a bug. It was more like a rename to make it more clear, because they had like weird, I think it was weird triple letter names littered everywhere, and like based on some internal meaning. I don't really remember.
The variables were named like A, B, C, and you named it like an actual word or something.
Something like that. Like it was based on some very old specification where they had like 2-letter names assigned for some reason.
I could see that coming from like a term info kind of history or something.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Okay. And then you said when you got started with the JavaScript engine, there was basically nothing there. It was just a stub of a JavaScript engine. So
he did one video where he basically stubs out some basic value types and an AST.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't even a parser or lexer yet. So to
write JavaScript, you actually had to build the AST by hand.
Yeah, that's precisely how he did it. So that's on YouTube. If you look for the first JavaScript engine video, he basically writes a little AST by hand and then executes that.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Wow.
Okay.
And then someone went and added the lexer and parser shortly afterwards, so a couple of days later. And so basically that's then where I started to do basic constructs like, okay, we need an if statement to work, because that wasn't implemented yet. So then people could go and implement stuff like simple operators like plus, minus. So really basic stuff, like literally from nothing. And then he worked to get that up and running.
So when you added the if statement, you had to add the lexer, the parser, the AST components, and then test it across the thing. Precisely.
So very basic parser at that point, and then you would basically either take existing tokens like if and then make the parser constructs around that, or you had to do some work on the lexer as well. And then at that point, it still was a basic AST interpreter. So you would then make basically a function, if statement, colon, execute, something like that, and that would compute the result. Nowadays, we have both AST interpreter and a bytecode interpreter, although that's still a bit work in progress. So it kind of evolved since then.
It seems like, well, I guess for the sake of our audience here, I just realized we didn't actually explicitly mention what Serenity is. We've been talking around it. We expected that most of our audience would know what it was. Could you just do a quick, and we're referring to Andreas Kling when we just say Andreas. There's lots of Andreases in the C++ community. We're referring to Andreas Kling. Would you mind giving us a quick overview as to what Serenity actually is?
Sure, of course. So Andreas Kling started SerenityOS in, I think, late 2018 as a from-scratch operating system. So back then he had, I think, 3 components, a basic kernel, an ELF loader, and an ext2 file system. And he kind of like put that together, and that's how he started. It's got the aesthetics of around Windows 95. So don't expect very modern looks, but that's all on purpose. So you got like very simplistic, very user-focused productivity UIs from the late 90s, basically, combined with a Unix-like operating system core. So it's got POSIX compatibility mostly. And yeah, he started working on that and then started doing the YouTube videos for that and basically built a community from there. And now it's like 20, 25 regular contributors and over 400 contributors all time. And so it's a really busy project now. He's working on it full time since April, May, I would say.
Okay.
So he basically quit his job and is now doing it full time based on donations.
That's
awesome.
It's an amazing story. And I hadn't thought about this before. I mean, the way this community is built up around the project, it's certainly an interesting project, but it's also very difficult to build community. And it kind of sounds like you were nerd sniped, and a lot of people were. That Andreas, I can't even, like, you're sitting there editing, well, this variable name really should be changed, but I'm not going to do that right now. Even if there's only 5 people watching, one of those people is going to be like, what? And they're going to submit that pull request to change the name for the variable. Mm-hmm. Or I just built this AST and can execute some simple stuff, but we're not going to bother with actually parsing a programming language. Someone's going to hop in and be like, how can you not have a parser? And like start banging that out really quick. That's kind of impressive.
That is actually how a lot of development happens. Yes.
That's great. So it worked for you.
Yeah, it absolutely did work for me, and it certainly worked for a lot of other people as well. He's basically just showing everyone that you can build anything from scratch. Like, it started literally nowhere, and now we're building our own web browser, our own JavaScript engine, our own everything. So really shows a lot of people what you can actually build still these days, even though it might seem too complex at first.
Right.
So
and I think that's what makes it especially attractive to people, because they then realize how much they could do with that kind of knowledge and kind of spirit.
Right. So do you want to tell us more about your current role with Serenity? How involved are you?
So I became a maintainer in April. Funny story. So Andreas went on an interview with JT, Systems with JT.
That's my cousin, Jonathan.
Oh, yeah.
If you didn't know that, Rob.
So they did an interview, and he mentioned, like, going forward, how would he be able to manage all the, because it's an ever increasing number of pull requests and contributors. So at that point, he was still the only maintainer, so no one would merge stuff except himself. And then he realized, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this forever. So he then started thinking about adding more people to the reviewer status, basically. So now it's 4 people: Andreas, Ali, Gunnar, and myself. So we're doing most of the reviewing and merging, but it's always encouraged to have non-maintainers review stuff as well. So if someone is really knowledgeable in a certain area of the project, we encourage that they can review that, and someone else will then merge it. So, but I'm not only a reviewer, so I'm also a regular contributor. I still work on stuff. It's not like I only click buttons and review code. Right. So mostly working on the JavaScript engine still, but also various other things that we can get into later. What else? I started helping Andreas with his monthly update videos. So very early, since the beginning, he does a small video on the last day of each month, basically summarizing all the changes of that month and doing little demos and showcases. So last one was yesterday. So in case people haven't seen that yet, they should check that out. So I'm basically demoing the browser and JavaScript changes in those videos as well.
Wow. So do you have an idea for like how many pull requests come in a week or a month or whatever? Like how many of the three of you? You said 3 total people I've been working with.
It's 4 people now.
4 people. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Yes, we got a very specific idea of that because GitHub has a little summary for each month exactly. So last month it was around 400 something commits. Commits. No, pull requests. Sorry.
400 pull requests in a month. Okay.
So we're averaging about 15 pull requests a day, and it was 1,500 commits last month.
Wow. So each one of you has to review something like 3 pull requests a day, pretty much.
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah.
But if you want more than one reviewer, then sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's accurate. But I mean, Andreas is doing it full time, so he's doing a little bit more than the rest of us, I think. But yeah, it depends a lot. Like it's always depending on what kind of pull requests they are, because I'm rarely reviewing kernel stuff because that's not really my area of expertise. So someone else would be much more suitable for that, and they would find more bugs and stuff. So like it depends a lot on what topics are currently covered, but 3 to 4 a day. Yeah.
Wow. So do you, just from like a community management perspective, do you have GitHub set up so that you must have a review or you must have 2 or 3 reviews on a pull request? And how do you like keep the process moving basically? Or what safeguards do you have in place too?
So we don't have any strict rules for the number of reviews that need to happen. Most of the time it's a single review. So one reviewer will go look at the PR and merge it or request some changes. We got a lot of CI going on and linters. So basic stuff like comment messages and like wrapping your comment messages at 72 characters and having like a little section, colon, and then a description is the format we enforce. So that's all covered by a bot. So basically saving us some work, the humans. Because it used to be, for a while, it used to be very common to like get a new PR, look at it, and then have to comment, please fix this commit message. And that's just a waste of time. So that's now automated.
Right.
Also doing CI on both builds from on macOS and Linux, and then starting a QEMU instance and running some on-target tests. So it's gotten quite advanced. And again, it's just saving us a lot of time, because if you got a build failure, then we don't even have to look at it, and we can just move on and look at it once the build failure is fixed.
Right. Now, it sounded like when we had Andreas on that the goal of the project was still what was mostly for everyone to be having fun. And now that Andreas is doing this full time and there's 3 other people helping with the pull requests, is that still the goal? Like you all just want people to come in and have fun on the project? Or is there any kind of overriding direction or anything like that these days? So
the general idea is that Andreas wants to use it as his primary system one day.
Okay.
But not before it's really ready for prime time. So he wants to do an early switch and then have like a terrible experience. So he's happy to spend a lot of time on it before that and like get the browser up and running so he can do his YouTube uploads from there.
Wow.
But also quite often you will hear from one of the members that there is no plan. Like whenever someone asks, like, when will you implement X? There's no plan. Like, if you want to see something implemented, you do it yourself. That's basically the one rule we have. So there's no roadmap, nothing like that. And yeah, it boils down to just having fun with programming for a lot of people.
The no plan.
Maybe they don't want to use the system at all. Like they just want to have fun experiencing how it is to build stuff, and that works for some people.
So as a new programmer to C++, how exactly did you go about learning C++? Was it just from what you picked up watching the videos, or did you have to go out and do a little bit of research on the side to get up to speed?
Right. So as I'm sure every programmer will be able to tell you, once you have learned a couple of languages, it gets a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I had already learned Python, which is still my strongest language, JavaScript, PHP, some experience with Java. So like once you have that exposure, it gets a lot easier to learn a new one, because basic concepts are still the same. It's just the syntax and some language-specific stuff that you have to learn from scratch. So it was basically all learning from learning by doing. So picking up a little task and then working through compiler errors, asking for help on the. Back then we still had an IRC channel. Now it's moving on to Discord. So like just doing small things and going from there, like starting with really, really simple tasks and like Googling, of course, stuff. I mean, it works. It did work. I think I'm now at the point where I'm pretty comfortable like tackling even larger projects without much help. But I mean, it's still good to have a community of people that have worked with C++ for 15, 20 years, where you can just go and ask really beginner questions as well. Like, how does this work? And maybe sometimes you just need a keyword that you can then look up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really helpful to have that community as well, opposed to just doing it by myself.
That's an interesting point, because I often feel that way when working with any new technology. Like I've in the last year been using a different video editing software for my YouTube channel and stuff. Like I know what I want to accomplish and I have Google, but I don't know what to search for.
Yeah.
Like there's that mental hurdle of like, I don't even know what term to put in here. And so I can see having a community where you can say, this is the kind of thing I want to do. And they just tell you, oh, go look up constexpr or whatever. Then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what are some of the different parts of Serenity that you've contributed to? Anything outside of libjs?
Quite a bit, yeah. So one thing I did in December, I think, was the crash reporter. So whenever you crash a project with like a segmentation fault or whatever, you get a little pop-up, like you might know from other platforms, where it tells you, oh, this crashed, and this was the path and the arguments, and here's a backtrace, stuff like that. So that was building on some existing work. We already had like a core dump generator. And so I made a little GUI program that would then automatically launch and display information from that. Which also was my first step into the kernel world, because I had to add a little syscall for that, so that you could capture additional information, basically. So the program would voluntarily give information to be included in the stack, in the crash dump. Things like what was the currently opened file or stuff like that. So yeah, that was one. And then just various little polishes, making small features, small tweaks. Like you can't really do anything because it's such a broad scope, and there's no limit really. Like whenever you're bored of something, you just look for something else, and then you will find hundreds of things to work on, because there are so many applications and libraries and layers, and it's all within the same code base. So there's a lot to discover.
One giant mono repo for all of it.
Yeah, it's all in the same repository, which is unlikely to change because it's been really valuable to be able to just have the whole stack from the kernel to the very last bit of the user space applications in the same repository, because you can be really confident that a change won't break anything, because either a build failure will catch it or CI test runs.
Yeah, so when the CI runs, it actually builds the whole kernel operating system and all the applications?
Everything, yeah. So we got two types of CI basically. So we got a parts of the system built on Linux. That's called lagom, which is a Swedish word for just enough, I believe. So that's like a little thing Andreas made to basically build some user space applications and libraries for Linux. So I can do development of the JavaScript, both library and REPL on my Linux machine. I don't have to boot Serenity a million times for that. So that is also doing the fuzzing. So you build it for a Linux host, and then we got fuzzers that run on OSS fuzz, so run by Google. And then we got a actual build of the Serenity disk image itself, so the kernel and user space libraries and programs. And that then boots in a QEMU instance on the CI runner and runs some tests on the emulated machine itself. So it's not running a Windows server yet, so it's basically headless, but it's working quite well.
And you know, since you said the main thing you contributed to, or at least initially, was the JavaScript engine, but then you also said that Andreas is looking forward to the day that he can upload his YouTube videos from the web browser. That's a lot of JavaScript that Google's running there. I'm curious how close your work is getting to supporting Andreas's vision here.
So I don't know about the specific YouTube case yet, but we run test262, which is like the official JavaScript test suite. They got something like 40,000 tests in there. And so we started tracking those on each pull request that gets merged.
Oh, wow.
So we make a new build, run it, and store the result, basically. And we are up to, as of today, I think 65% of coverage of all tests are passing.
Okay.
And for comparison, that's also where Microsoft's JavaScript engine they use for the old Edge browser last was. So when they basically abandoned it, it was around 65%. So it's going into a really good direction now.
Wow. So just out of curiosity, do you know, does Node pass all the tests? Like, is there anyone who passes all of them?
I think no browser is actually passing 100%. So I think the top browsers are at like 97 probably.
Okay.
Because there's some stuff that's either very exotic or that technically changed in the spec but isn't changed in the browsers for backwards compatibility.
Okay. That's another interesting question. Is Serenity, is your work concerned about breaking backward compatibility, or do you figure with the mono repo, it's fine, you just move forward?
Not at all. So whenever you want to change something, you can do that. Like, we're not at that point where we are concerned about binary compatibility or something like that, or even allowing like external applications to have a stable API. Because at the moment we don't have external applications. Like, everything that's developed is within the project, and if we want to change an API, we can just go and do it. Like, we don't need to take care of external projects using the user space, so we can basically go wild and do whatever we want. It's very different from some other projects where I have to maintain backwards compatibility for years. It's not like that at all at the moment.
Well, as long as you keep everything internal, it's a definite appeal to it.
Like, I made some small programs that use APIs that we have but are compiled outside the repository, and those usually break within a couple of weeks. So if you don't keep them up to date, then expect an outside application to be broken within 2-3 weeks probably. Because some API that it uses just changes, and then you're screwed.
You mentioned that Python is your other language that you're most familiar with, JavaScript and Python. Does Python work come into play at all on this project? So we don't use it for anything other than linting. So there's a couple of basic scripts that like lint some stuff. Like we got a ports system. So
there are some Python scripts that like lint all the port scripts and ensure that stuff like hashes for certain files are present and you're not skipping a version number or something like that. And that's an interesting path towards. I actually ported Python itself to Serenity because I wanted to have like the latest Python running. So I did a Python 3.9 port initially. I recently updated it to the latest 10. something release candidate. That's not even stable yet, but it works. It just works.
I would have been very sad if you had said it was a Python 2 port that you had worked on.
No. I refuse to make that happen. That's just it's dead yet. It's dead by now. It's just dead.
Just let it die.
Yeah.
Do you see potentially making like an official pull request to Python to add Serenity as one of the officially supported operating systems there?
Yeah, so upstreaming stuff is always interesting, especially now that our C library gets more and more complete. So initially you would have to patch out random stuff from programs just because a bit of the C library was missing, and then you end up with like 10 patches that you can't really submit because every other operating system with a proper C library will just work. But now as that gets fixed and those patches get removed, you quite often end up with the only patch being Serenity missing from the like make files and stuff. So it's like often it's a single line that you have to add to make it compile. And in those cases, it's quite interesting to ask for upstream support, basically. And someone actually went and added it to the canonical configure script, I think.
Okay.
So once external programs use a relatively up-to-date configure script, they will automatically include Serenity in that. And in the ideal case, that will mean 0 patches. It will just work.
That sounds like GNU autoconf, like someone added it.
Yeah, that stuff. Exactly. Yeah. And so for Python specifically, I actually did a upstream pull request to include the web browser, because Python got a web browser module where you can say web browser is open and will like open the system configured web browser. And obviously ours is custom made and not present on any other system. So it didn't work. So they actually accepted that, and it will be in the Python 3.10 release.
So how complete is your port then? Can I, do like pip and automatically grab the packages that I want for things? And
the one major thing that's not working yet is sockets, so networking.
So not pip then, in other words.
Not pip yet, yeah. Because I think there's Python is quite relaxed about just trying to build modules, and then if something's missing, you will just not get that one module, so it won't fail the whole build. It just excludes certain modules that fail to build. So socket is the one. It's probably some simple fix. Someone has to go and add something to our networking stack, but we'll get there.
That's awesome. That's fun.
Yeah. Has working on Serenity and getting yourself taught up on C++ brought you into the larger C++ community? Are you working on any other C++ projects outside of Serenity?
Technically, yes, but it's also related. So actually, no. Like it's the external test runner for test262 that I mentioned. That is not included in the main repository because it started as a Python script, because that's what I knew better back then, and kind of evolved and is now a C++ runner, but it's still an external project. So maybe we'll merge it, and then the answer would be definitely no external projects for me, but I would definitely be more comfortable joining a different project now. Not that I want to, because I'm really busy with Serenity already. Yeah. But like I'm at a point where I could comfortably dive into a different project and start working with that. Definitely.
I was thinking, we were discussing books at the top of the episode here. You should write a book that's like learning C++ in a year by contributing to an open source operating system. It's a very succinct title.
maybe that's something people want to read. Yeah.
It might be, actually. Who knows? Are there any plans for the Serenity community to meet up at an upcoming conference or anything like that?
No specific plans as usual. There
Right.
is no plan. I mean, I don't know. There are a couple of like very small, very local meetups where like 2 contributors, or I think the largest was a group of 4 or 5 people that like met and happened to all live in the same town in Australia and met up for an evening.
That's
so like
cool.
you got very small local meetups, but no Serenity conferences planned yet.
Have any of the other Serenity community members started streaming themselves along with Andreas?
Not that I know of. So I don't think so.
I'm also curious, just since you've just picked up C++, like for those of us who are a little bit older, like we know like 10 years ago, tooling was just like, well, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, tooling was terrible. Like a decent IDE was like bad, no auto completion. I mean, you had IntelliSense and Visual Studio, but it's not like it is today. So I'm curious if you have settled into any particular tools that you like using when editing and working on Serenity.
Yes, absolutely. So I use C-Line. I love it. It's great. I already used the Python equivalent years ago. Not currently, but so I already had some familiarity with JetBrains IDEs. So we got some licenses for the core contributors, and it's great.
So yeah, it's Andreas uses C-Line also, right?
Also, yeah, right.
Okay.
So that, and then we use CMake for our build system, which I don't mind. Like it seems decent. Some people. The thing is, some people have like strong opinions about existing stuff, and I don't have any of those because I just joined basically, and I just pick up what everybody around me is using.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that you just said that. There's like, as a new C++ user, I don't mind CMake. Okay, that's good. That's
like there are neither positive strong or negative strong emotions towards anything in the C++ ecosystem from me,
right.
Which makes it really productive to just pick up whatever is already there and start using it. It might of course turn out that later I discover like all the stuff that some people have already discovered and dislike, but not in the beginning.
I find that refreshing. That's yeah. Most of our guests have strong opinions about these things.
Yeah.
And then for compilers, we have both a working GCC and Clang toolchain. So it was GCC only initially. So we have like a custom GCC build that basically makes a cross-compile toolchain and that then compiles it. But someone else made a Clang-based one, so now we have both and also run both on CI. So you really have the choice if you prefer one or the other.
How often do you find, and I find this interesting also as a question from you as a new C++ developer, that you have to fight between them? Like GCC is warning on something that Clang doesn't. You fix GCC and now all of a sudden you get a different warning on Clang. Have you had that experience?
Not really. It seems quite rare. So at least the way we work and using all the libraries we use just works basically. I think there's a little bit of if-def stuff for both GCC and Clang, but nothing that usually affects me.
Okay. So that's something that older developers will complain about. So I was curious if you had seen it. I find it less likely as well these days.
I mean, yeah, especially with some stuff like concepts, they used to disagree or something would not work in Clang that would work in GCC. So we had that before, that we would have like remove some stuff that we added prematurely because it turns out the Clang build was not happy.
Right.
But mostly that brand new stuff that sometimes doesn't work in both.
Okay. So is there anything else you want to tell us about the, your involvement with the Serenity community and, is Serenity community looking for even more developers? Anything in particular that you hope gets worked on?
I mean, yeah, we're always welcoming new contributors. So everyone can just pick up whatever they want. There's a large list of like possible future enhancements and bugs in the issues on GitHub. So, for example, if you have watched the videos for a while and want to get started, picking a small bug and fixing that is always good to like get started, get familiar with the code base and all the processes. We're also in Discord, as I said, so we moved from IRC to a Discord server and turned out to be a great decision because it's really active. It's got like more than 4,000 members right now. It's just very nice community to ask questions whenever you have any or have trouble with the build, which is actually quite rare because we spent a lot of time on improving like documentation and scripts for the build. But yeah, definitely feel free to join the community on the Discord server or on GitHub if you want to get started with development.
Okay. Well, Linus, it was great having you on the show today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
That's great. Thanks.